Gotcha.
Facebook's business model as a brand, what they do is they retain attention for as long as possible. Google and Amazon, their business model is to get you off of Google and off of Amazon as quickly as possible. So the business objective of how to be good at Google and how to test for that is how do I give somebody what they want so they leave? Facebook is how do I give somebody what they want so they'll stay? So if that ad doesn't get spent, Facebook and whatever they've decided is this is a liability to our business model. You've given us 12 choices. This choice costs us money. We're not going to let you do it. We're not going to spend there. Or if we do, the CPM is going to be really high. Or so it's going to get leveraged out. So if that ad doesn't get delivery, it's a clear sign that for whatever reason, it's ultimately not meeting the business objectives of your partner. And ultimately, you don't have control over what ads get shown into who. And if you did have control, that would require you making literally thousands of decisions every second, like 24 hours a day. Like, that's impossible. So it's a machine, right? And so your job is, how do I set up my business partner to be effective? Because at best, I can only micromanage a bunch of variations of my business partner. And usually when I do that, I get a much worse result.
What do you say to the people who are like, okay, well, I've spent $5,000 on this creative. I need to see if it has some legs or whatever it is and if Facebook's not going to spend on it, well, I have to force spend on it and see what happens myself, right? What do you say to that?
Great question.
Yeah, I get that a lot. And I will say this. Generally, one of two things happens. And believe me, I've in my day, I've done that probably 1,000 times. Like, yeah, you spend a couple $100 million, you do that a few times, right? And I will say basically one of two things happens. Number one, that ad does really well in Facebook. Like the CPA looks great. And then say, okay, cool. So what I need to do is not trust Facebook at all. And in a month, in 2 months, you have an ad account with a bunch of isolated killers that are all dying off faster and faster and faster because you set up a system that predicates itself on you having to be right and that creates depreciation in all of those assets. And while that's happening, generally speaking, your CPMs are going up too. Because now you got a bunch of killers that all work in isolation, competing against each other, and basically they all, instead of there being enough food for one dog to eat, now they're all starving. And so they kill each other off. And so your solution is, I'm just going to get more dog. I'm just going to throw more things in there. So you're setting up a system that ultimately can't scale. So even if you're right, the net outcome of extrapolating that out 10 moves is you're dead. So probably not a good idea. The other thing that will happen is you do that and maybe it does work for a while and then it doesn't. And you get, what you do see is your other environment gets directly impacted by it. And do I want one ad that works well that I know because I'm forcing delivery, I'm going to see ad fatigue, which is a choice. And I'm creating ad fatigue on this asset while also depreciating my control environment. Is that net positive for me? Do I want to make every one of my employees worse by giving my 1-star employee a month under the sun and then have to rebuild the whole thing? What I don't see happen is you do that and then you have 3 ads that you're forcing in isolation. Your entire account is just basically those 3 ads and it works forever. And you never have to test again. Like, that model doesn't work past step 2.
So at scale, it's like saying, okay, well, if I'm going to test this creative in this isolated environment, I start to scale that up. I see conversions. I see a really good CPA. My blended looks fine, right? Which is what I think I'm hoping marketers are starting to look at more now. It's not just what's seeing, in platform, but your blended, CPA using, our favorite, triple whale tool.
Powerful
and
shout
seeing, and so from there, right, that's where I think we can kind of go back to what you kind of agreed on, which is if I'm validating the test outside of the main environment, 100, 200 conversions, whatever, and then saying, okay, well, I have a better bet tossing it back into the big boys. That, to me, I feel like, one, on an investment perspective, I spent $5K on this creative. I've proved that it can convert. Now let me see if we can kind of convert with the big boys. That's where like I feel like I can justify my cost outside of the business as well, getting the creative and things like that. So that to me makes sense versus like, all right, if I toss it in the big boy campaign, it doesn't get any spend. It's like, well, like now I got to answer to my creative agency that said, hey, we just produced this for you. What happened? And it's like, well, Facebook didn't spend on it. So what do you want me to do? You know? So it has to account for all these other elements of the business, which is what is tough for marketers to wrap their heads around.
I will say that, like, at a small degree, I understand that. And let me take, at 310, for instance, I had $100,000 a month budget on the acquisition of influencer user-generated content. Like, I had $100,000 that I had to spend every month. I had this exact conversation with Tim, CEO of iRecon that owns a bunch of things. And what we got down to was, I got him to buy into the idea, and ultimately it was a mutual decision between me and Marina Randolph, who is our president, former VP of Guthrie Banker. She's a G, by the way. Check out Marina Randolph if you don't know it. Rob has met her, maybe.
I think so.
What we came down to was the reason we're paying money to outsource creative is because if we get an ad that we can spend $1 million on, it's worth everything else. The point is, I want to be able to say, now let's take it to the nth degree. I've got a very simple campaign where I've got 4, 5, 6 control ads. And I know the frequency and the CPM by day on these ads. And I know how they're affecting my omni-channel marketing. And I've got the incremental lift nailed down. I can go to my creative team and say, I need a video ad that will target mid-funnel, that's going to have a better CPM or CPA than something else. Here's the thing it has to be. Now my creative shop isn't just dumping out things that they like. And now my creative test can last for weeks or months. Because say it does work and my blended CPA improves. Well, the net output of that is I can probably just spend more money on Facebook. I don't even need to move the post ID of that test in my control environment to like max out my omni-channel efficiency. But now that creative team is being evaluated on their hit rate of taking the extraordinarily specific creative brief of the business objective that needs to be solved for. And they can deliver hits often enough to pay for themselves. And like, I mean, at Under Outfit, we had an ad that was quite literally from a photo shoot. I built it in the slideshow. I think Felix built it in the slideshow in Facebook's ad unit. Like just here's an ad, here's 5, 6 images, put it in a little video. That one ad spent like nearly $2 million.
Retention.com isn't just sponsoring Adspend, and Retention.com isn't just there to help you grow your email funnels. They're also an amazing resource for marketers. Check out their podcasts, check out their YouTube channel, check out their resources, including the 5 fundamental marketing flows you need to grow. Get all of that at Retention.com. The link is in the description below.
I want to interject here a little bit because I love both of the perspectives, but I don't know where you landed on this, Ash, but I think I might be trending more towards, and you're going to kill me, blasphemy, Charlie's side here, because for me, the situation you get into there is good money behind bad money. If they created an ad that is not performing, do you really want to spend $10,000 to validate that this ad does not perform or whatever percent of budget? And so I think for me, it's a little bit more what Charlie's saying is that you need to have the creative agency more aligned with what you want out of them. And there also needs to be, if $5,000 isn't a lot of money to that business, that's fine. But I'm more of the ilk of, because I've done this as well, where, I mean, RIP the creative agency, but we were building ads in Canva that were destroying these high production ads. And so it got to a place of like, dude, we don't need to spend like $20,000 to run this ad account on creatives. Let's spend it more on ads, or let's throw events, or to Charlie's point, let's hire influencers. And so I love the example because I think it comes up a lot, but I think that it is, it can be a bit of a siren song of like, oh my gosh, I spent all this money on this ad. Like, can flip it into brand awareness, start smashing it across organic, start try and get some more mileage out of it. But just like there's a economic thingy to get nerdy, of sunk costs. Like that money's spent, dog. You pumping the tires on this car that doesn't have an engine. Like, is that really, like, I think one of the jobs of media buyers or CMOs or marketing leaders is capital allocation. You know, maybe you took a bet and that you got the $5,000 done, and it's an amazing video, but you know in your heart of hearts that, like, this isn't a pro. This isn't it's not going to win. And so how can I get the maximum amount of value from this asset without having to put good money behind bad money? So that would be my only pushback to that thing. And again, I think where it gets really tricky is when this is the founder or a high up's brainchild, and you have to be very understanding of the politics of that, because it's very hard to call your baby ugly. And so what I would do is lay out the land of, like, okay, cool, we spent X amount of dollars on here. You have me budgeted for Y amount of dollars. The signs of this video popping off compared to historicals are not great. Very rarely do you have this come from behind. Like, if anything, Facebook is not a come from behind story. Like, you win or you don't. And so then you get to a place of, like, here's what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's their money. As long as you can show them, hey, you know, this is the path you want to go down, and you want to go put a bucket of money and light it on fire, and you want me to report on that, that's totally fine. But that's probably what's going to happen. I think that's kind of the best case scenario you can get when you have a lot of vested interests in a certain creative doing well, because I've had that before. And it is, you know, it's awkward where it's like, you know, not to have the crass analogy, but you don't want to give lump sums of money to addicts. It is what it is. That money, that money is gone, dog. Like, you know, that money's gone.
No,
and
it makes total sense. Rabbi, I got a question for you, because I think, so Charlie, the theory and the strategy here makes complete sense. I'm on the same page, which is why I messaged you even this morning. I said, hey, I've been testing this. I have questions around it, but what your explanation makes total sense. Rabba, question for you now, right? Because what you said also kind of like, as a founder or operator who kind of understands this, right? But now you have a team that, sorry, we're moving away from like the tactics of like ad account structure, but say you have the team where, like, I have my video editor who's taking his time, editing videos, this and that, all for him to come back and say next week, like, hey, how did that one video perform? I was really looking forward to that and seeing what happens there. And I have to go and say, like, well, Facebook didn't spend anything on it. We got to move on to the next idea, right? And he's just like, well, what if it did work? What if we separated it out? What if we did this, right? How can I now, as like a manager, a person in that managerial role, now have this person understand that when it's technically not exactly their role as like a media buyer to understand why, but have them feel like, hey, their work is being valued, and two, like, we're not just like tossing their shit to the side and just moving on to the next thing, right?
Absolutely love this question. I want to get your viewpoint too, Charlie, but this is super near and dear to my heart. One of the companies that was a client was an Australian public company, really big iPhone app. And the way we got around this was gamify it. And so essentially you have your creatives, and every week we'd run a test. And to Charlie's point, we throw it into the mix and you try and dethrone the champion. If you don't dethrone the champion, it is what it is. You can get, we had, the way we ran it was essentially we would greenlight one core concept. The creative agency would give us 4 iterations of that core concept. And then we would run all those iterations, and then we would, you win or you didn't. And there wasn't any, oh, you didn't give me a fair shot or anything like that. We were, here's the amount of, and to be fair, Charlie, we did do a little bit of testing, but because there were certain variations of people we did want to draft into the big leagues. But that was it, where it's like, dude, you get X amount of shots to make it, and that's what you have to work with. So, I mean, the creative, I don't think will get too caught up in the too long didn't read is the systemization portrayed a feeling of fairness, where to your point, like, oh, my creatives were getting a shot. Did this beat the champion creative? And a lot of times it won't. But to Charlie's point, like, if you can get going back to the sports analogies, there's 5 person on a basketball team. If you can get an awesome, like, 3rd player, 4th player, even like a 5th player that are still contributing, but you still have your superstars there, that's a win. And so for me, that systemization of getting in that cadence of the creative of like, here's our core concept. You need to develop these core concepts. Give me 4 iterations. Let's run these 4 iterations against the champion. And it was really fun. It was one of the better meetings of the week because everybody was excited. Like the creatives aren't in the ad account. And as the media buyer, I got to do all this analysis and stuff. And so that was something that I found really helpful to alleviate not only the anxiety of the creative, but bringing a helpful structure around everything. And then it also gave you something to send to management or your boss, right? Like, here's the creative test we ran. Here's what our champion creatives are producing. Did we beat this week? No. And dude, I was there for almost 2 years. And I think like there was 4 times we were able to dethrone the champion out of, 50 tests, maybe 60 tests. So it's what I guess the too long didn't read. And I want to take like a meta level here, no pun intended, is that